Hi there, welcome to Tuba Tutorials. This week's episode is about Paul Hindemith's Sonata for bass, tuba, and piano. These videos, when I first started doing them, wanted to put them out to offer performers and teachers new ideas for pieces that we've played so many times. I've gotten so much from listening to other players play these pieces and other teachers teach these pieces, and I just wanted to offer you a couple of ideas that I think about when I'm playing and teaching these pieces. Now, just a broad overview about this piece. Paul Hindemith, of course, a very well-known German composer. He wrote a sonata for every wind instrument, and of course, tuba is in the wind instrument category, so we got a sonata. Paul Hindemith is, of course, a very serious German composer who writes serious music, but what I think a lot of tuba players forget sometimes is that we do not play a very serious instrument. Of course, that does not mean that we can't play serious music, but what I think the composer was trying to achieve with this music, and this is just my own personal interpretation, is that it's kind of a whimsical piece. Sonatas, of course, they are absolute music, meaning that they don't carry any kind of subjective interpretation on behalf of the composer. So we as players can kind of interpret our own meaning from within these pieces. I think that because this piece is meant to be taken whimsically, it's often not played the correct way when someone just kind of tries to play it very straight and then just kind of ends up being misunderstood. The last time I played this, I really tried to bring out the whimsical characters, and I think people thought about it more as kind of a digestif, a piece that you could use to kind of whet the appetite for anything else that's on the program, instead of kind of like the big concerto or sonata on the program. It can be that, but I think it's more digestible for the audience if it's sort of taken a little less seriously. And we as tuba players want to be taken very seriously, but I don't think this music is meant to be played very seriously. So musically, just a couple of things that I like to think about when I'm playing and teaching this piece. One of the biggest pitfalls of this piece is in the first 3 bars. These jumps of ninths are huge, and the ninth is not an interval that as tuba players we play very often. So how can we simplify this? How can we make this easier for us as players? I always tell my students to play the second note of each bar down the octave so that it's just stepwise as you're going up, so you can hear the intervals before you play it as written. So we're just kind of playing them very long, very broad. They're full half notes. And of course the piano comes in on these quarter rests that we have. So it's very important to be very metronomic with this. It's very sort of, I see it, of course it's in 6, but I feel it in 2. Ba, 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 very metronomic. The other really important thing about this opening section, is that these 8th notes need to be very, very clear. Of course, as tuba players, we're not known to be the clearest instrument in the orchestra, but I think if we play these phrases, these notes very metronomically, the 8th notes will come out a lot clearer. B from bar 5, B, ba, 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 B, ba, 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 ba. Just really feeling each subdivision of those half notes, and I feel like that will really help you out with playing these 8 notes exactly in time. They're sort of hard to really get, and just putting a firm T front, ta, on those 8 notes I think will make them pop out a little more. Going into A, I think a lot of people will try to sort of slam into this B, but I see this as kind of a more relaxed resolution. Really nice and long in that B too. And then it segues nicely into this section at A, which is piano dolce. This opening phrase is, I think, really schmaltzy. And then we have to go back into that character before where we're extremely metronomic and trying to get those 8 notes to speak exactly in time. At B, we get back into this kind of declamatory style. B, ba-da-da, B, bum, ba-da-da, B, beam, ba-da-da. Really forte down to mezzo forte on the downbeat of 22. And then, of course, it's not written in the second half of 22 into 23 that we're doing that same thing. So keep that one a little dynamically a little more flat, and then really crescendo back into this opening figure at 25. And of course, if you're having trouble with these intervals, just play it like we played at the opening. Take these second notes of each bar down the octave so that it becomes a second and not a ninth, and then bump it back up the octave so that it's easier. I always use it with my students, and it's night and day because you can finally hear that interval instead of kind of reaching for it up there. And then relaxed into C. And the reason why I kind of call this piece whimsical is because I think the composer is flipping between this kind of very declamatory style and this kind of more relaxed style. And this style at 34, this next section, is kind of a combination of the two. It's not piano, so it's not meant to be played really quietly, but it is a more relaxed figure than what we're seeing earlier in the piece. Getting in at D, I think the mezzo forte, probably play that a little bit less. It's important not to kind of like disappear, like play piano, but I think a nice healthy mezzo piano would be really, really good here. You're going up to the B flat on top of the staff. I really don't think it's important to kind of crescendo all the way up to the B flat because the range will take care of that. And that's, I think, a big sticking point for a lot of brass players is that as we're ascending, kind of naturally crescendo, but the tessitura of our instruments will kind of take care of that. And you won't be pressing in a register that really doesn't respond well to pressing. And then really kind of dolce when you get down to this piano. This section, of course, is very important to count very, very accurately. The piano is playing off you canonically here. But then when you're peaking at this F sharp in measure 45, 46, I really don't think it's sort of, there's a, hairpins crescendo, decrescendo up to that F sharp, but you really don't need to get too loud there. I think you should probably save, kind of the big dynamic high point to this section that's coming up, this kind of, heavy section. So don't get too loud here. Just kind of go down to niente. I know there's no decrescendo written, but I think it fits well here. And then at E, of course, we have these accents, forte, kind of really da 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 dee da dee da dee da 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 dee bum bum beam bum beam bum beam. The composer often likes to go between forte and mezzo forte. Sometimes I think it's a little bit, it would help you out to stretch that a little bit. And I wouldn't stretch it in the high end. I wouldn't play the forte louder than it needs to be. But I do think the mezzo forte, you can play that a little bit quieter. Bum bum beam bum 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 beam. That might help you out. Really important here is just the accents. What I tell my students to do here is just practice. There's not a lot of accents, but whenever there's accents involved, I get them to practice all the notes that are accented in a phrase and just take out all the notes that are unaccented. Just so you can kind of bring them out without pushing. It's more kind of about emphasis instead of a push dynamically. Good, and then moving on, same at 63, just kind of really bring out these accents, but you're ascending in the register, you're not below the staff anymore. So this is forte, not fortissimo, not triple forte. So just make sure not to push too hard on the dynamic, and I think this might help you out a lot. And this is particularly true as well at 67, 68 when you get even higher, when you're going up to that B flat. It says fortissimo. I really don't think you need to push the dynamic top end that high, mostly because, you're playing by yourself with piano. And if you're playing the big horn, that's really gonna come out. This register is particularly audible. And for anyone who's ever played in an orchestra, whenever you're in this register, you'll always get the hand. And it's important to kind of pull back on this register because it's so open and it's so just audible from 100 feet away. Now you're only playing by yourself with piano. So just kind of take this back a little bit if you can. Into G, da 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 dum bum bum bum. This trill, I think a lot of people have different opinions about this, but what I do here, and I think it's really effective, is I'll do, of course, 2 and 3 for that G sharp, and then trill up to 3rd valve for the A, and then the F double sharp, G sharp, A. So it's try to see this. The composer doesn't indicate to, kind of ease into the trill, but just really get right into it. I think it fits the style pretty well. And then of course, beep ba beep ba ba, poco largamente, ba 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 ba, nice and broad. And of course, there's poco largamente. Some people will take this a little bit slower here. I personally don't like to take it that much slower because I think the range kind of takes care of making this a big landing point for the piece. And of course, this moment here, I think, is the big arrival point for the movement. Da 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 da, beep ba ba beep ba ba beep ba ba beep ba ba ba, and no diminuendo into H. One of my biggest bugaboos about this piece. There's no diminuendo written, and I don't think that it's appropriate to diminuendo into H. It's forte, of course. Where you are at poco largamente is fortissimo plus a crescendo, maybe plus, maybe triple forte, but there's no diminuendo indicated. You're just kind of recalling the material that you played at the beginning of the piece. So ba be ba be ba be ba 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 dee. I think just subito forte. I think that's the way to do it. And then really kind of, I like to put a nice little vibrato on this F here, this piano F. And then you're into what is one of the coolest sections in the whole movement. This grazioso, tranquillo, kind of really slithery section. Tranquillo, of course, you can pull it back tempo-wise in this section, and I think it'll be fine. Tranquillo is kind of an ambivalent term. It can mean, playing it slower. It can also mean, playing it a little bit lighter and quieter. I think it's kind of all relevant here. This is up for interpretation, I think. And I like to play this a little under tempo, but really, really with a lot of character. And then, again, all this material from I all the way out, even though you're kind of going from piano at I to pianissimo in the middle around 95, and then the poco lento, you go back up to piano, even though you're in the lower register. I think the composer is trying to bump that up so you don't play it too quietly so that the notes speak. Kind of all fading out here. But I think it's just important to kind of get that sense of, you're leaving, but this material at the end, I still have some things to show you in this piece. And again, I just think this piece is really lovely when it's played whimsically, and just kind of a little misunderstood when it's played seriously. A lot of the melodic, kind of really heavy material is in the second movement. Is in the first movement, sorry. In the second movement, I think we're getting into a lot of accompaniment material. You notice that you'll play, from this point on, the piano's playing a lot of the melodies. So, of course, this melody, if you will, at the beginning of the second movement, I think should be played as light as possible. Then you get into this accompanimental material. this is why I really like playing C tuba on this piece, because those B flats are just really, really nice and rich and really add to the left hand of the piano at A. So if you can play this piece on a big tuba, it's a good exercise to play a solo piece on a big tuba. Again, at the beginning, just really, really light here. Make sure not to rush. The piano, again, is on the offbeats, just like the opening of the first movement. So it's really important to just stay completely in time here. It doesn't need to be too fast. I think a lot of people will just kind of take off here. But bum, bing, bum, bing, bum, bing, bum. Allegro aside, fast enough. Really lyrical too when you get to 9. Just kind of give a little bit of the kind of violent character that's coming in at 16. Don't give too much. Of course, it's only mezzo forte. And then you play a lot of B flats insofar as you kind of forget that this is a solo piece when you're playing so much accompanimental material. And then you kind of have this nice little bass line that gets into B, this material, this rhythm, this melody that you play several times. Ba, beep, ba, 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 beep, ba, 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 beep, ba, beep. Of course, it's fortissimo twice, and then at 49, you don't have a dynamic written. I think they just forgot to put fortissimo there. So you'll play this the same dynamic again. When it changes is at C, 55, of course, there's a little bit of a crescendo. You'll probably want to start this one a little bit softer so that you can make room for this crescendo, of course. And then the last statement of this theme is piano with no crescendo. So play that really, really quietly. And then you get back into similar material as the opening at D. Going back a little bit, I think at B, C, all this melody that you played 5 times, I just hear a lot of people just play it the same way so many times. And of course, that's sort of what the composer intended. What I like to do is at B, I'll play it fortissimo. The second statement, I'll dial back just a hair. And the statement at 49 will be mezzo forte. Statement at 55 will be mezzo piano. Just kind of like, you know, turning it down going into D, just so it's not the same thing over and over. The piano has some really, really interesting figures here, so you really want to make room for them. Your instrument is very loud, so it can really easily take over what the piano is doing. So just be aware of that. Of course, then at 81, we have a restatement of the original theme, but off by a beat. It is so important that before you play this with the piano, you play this with the metronome on the offbeats and on the onbeats, just so that you know exactly where to put these notes, because it might be a little discombobulating when you put it with the piano. It'll just kind of sound similar when I play it, if I play it, but again, just trying to make sure to play it with the metronome on the beats and off the beats to get this completely in time. And then this line at 97, which is kind of just a solo line, just kind of meant to be a rush to the end. Some people play this out of time. I'm not sure if this fits the kind of go-ahead nature of the movement, but I like to just play this, again, just sort of straight through. It's almost like you want the audience to be like, what did he just play? Or what did she just play? Or what did they just play? Again, this movement is the most whimsical part of a very whimsical sonata. So just be aware of that. And then the last movement, of course, it's a lot of repeated material. I think this movement kind of is just really meant to showcase the piano. The biggest part of this movement is of course this quasi-cadenza that I'll play and talk about in a second. But this material it's theme and variations, and you meant to play it as expressively as possible from the opening, but a lot of these dynamics are really turned down, which makes it really kind of difficult to play on the C tuba because of where it is in the tessitura. When you have a mezzo forte, just make sure to really kind of use that moment. I'm looking particularly at measure 20, when you can really kind of showcase the higher end of the dynamics there. Also at C, it's kind of a really good moment that you can use to sing. But a lot of this is very quiet, and I think that's why the composer just kind of intended to allow you to showcase the quieter ends of your dynamics. So from the opening. Good, and then I really want to get into this material with the cadenza because there's a lot to talk about. At E, of course, this is sort of getting out of this duet material. Piano has a long interlude. This material at E and then at G is repeated, so you have it once. I like to play the one at E kind of very straight, which kind of segues nicely back into what the piano is doing solo. And then at G, get right in, and then I like to play this really, really open. Not so stretched that it's like its own cadenza, but it just kind of is alluding to what's going to happen in the lento. A lot of this material at the lento, some people will call it a cadenza, but it's written very precisely. So to call it a cadenza is, I think, a little bit of a misnomer. I want to play it down just to kind of be able to play what I'm going to talk about. But of course, really important to bring out the dynamics as always. But really important to bring out the allegro character later on. Again, I'll kind of go over what I play after I play it down. So that's it. There's the cadenza. After playing it for you with the assistance of John Wilson, an amazing pianist friend of mine, I wanted to sing through it one more time and just sort of note some of the things that I'm thinking about while I play this one. Again, I think it's just a product of learning the rhythms very accurately, being very intimate with the tempo and movement markings and the dynamics and everything, and knowing exactly where the piano plays and where they don't play. When the piano's not playing, there's a little bit of room to move forward and interpret what Hindemith's written with a little bit of subjectivity. But when the piano's playing, you sort of need to wait and to be aware of when they do play. So, from the lento, this is from 75. Really writ, almost quasi fermata there. Piano plays a little bit here. Dum dum dum. Be bum ba 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 bum. Be bum ba 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 bum ba ba. Be piano hit. ba 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 bum beam ba 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 bum beam ba dum be da dum. Piano ba dum bum bum ba dum bum bum ba dum. Piano ba dum bum beam ba da dum. Piano ba dum bum be ba dim bum be dum. Kind of a very whimsical moment there. Ba-dum, bum, beam, ba-dum, ba-deem, ba-dum, ba-da-dee-dee-dum, da-dee. Recalling the material from the opening. Dee-dum, bum, bum, be-da, ba-da-dee-da. So again, it just really takes a lot of knowledge looking at the score where the piano comes in. And of course, having these lines under your fingers, because it's not the easiest thing to play. My interpretation of this section is, of course, I think it is meant to be played a little freer than some of the material that we have before it, but it's not a cadenza. I think Hindemith demonstrates by this that he is a control freak and doesn't want the player to have enough liberties to play their own cadenza. So he's sort of like written it out for you, the notes and the cadenza. So if you play it the way that he's written out, I think it ends up sounding very free and very kind of, moody, switching between various moods very quickly. And then after that, you kind of just go back to material that was from the opening, but now it's accompanied by running 16th notes in the piano. So take some time to find a pianist who is willing to play this with you, because it may be difficult. And really go by their tempo. I mean, of course, this needs to be played, relatively quickly, but if your pianist can't play it without, fumbling at all, I think you should probably go to their tempo, because this is a very, very difficult spot for virtually every pianist who's not Glenn Gould. So you're just playing melodies here. Of course, you have the leading line, but it's piano espressivo. So this, I think, sonically, the spotlight should be shared between the tuba and the piano, even though you have the melodic material. A lot of really interesting harmonies in the piano part. So play this down, but espressivo. And other than that, there's not a whole lot that hasn't already been said about this movement. Make sure that when you do have mezzo forte, that you use it, to kind of clear the air, because it's kind of difficult to play so quietly for so long, and just to show some contrast when you do have something that's louder. And really, really quiet at the end. I think this piece is just meant to kind of fade into nothingness. It ends oddly in a very major way after all this kind of like tumult and storm. And again, I think that just points to what I said before. The thesis of my interpretation of this piece is that it's not meant to be a super serious piece. It's a piece that is written by a serious composer, but I think there is quite a bit of whimsy to be had in this, and a lot of moods that need to be fleshed out. If I'm programming this on a recital, it's never kind of like the big sonata or concerto. I'll put it like on the first half and then have the big piece on the second half, because if you play this on the quicker side, you can play this piece in 11 minutes, and that's not a lengthy piece by any means. There are some like single movement pieces that go on for that long. So if it were me, just don't make this kind of like the big piece on your senior recital. Make it, kind of an appetizer for something to come. And I think your audience will appreciate it in that sense. But anyway, thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you got something out of this.